Imagine you just graduated college. You had spent 3 years or 4 years working to cultivate skills that will make you competitive in the workplace and set you up for a career that will lead to a lifelong era of fulfillment. And one of the most powerful men in the world, the President of the United States, comes to make your commencement address. And instead of setting you up for that future by inspiring you or by offering advice, he does this instead.
Today, you missed your high school graduation. You started college just as George Floyd was murdered. And there was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? The trail of broken promises still leave black communities behind. What is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot. And most of all, what does it mean, as we've heard before, to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure?
Wow. Now, the responses to this have been scathing, and they've also been rather uniform as well. Many people are criticizing that portion of Biden's commencement address at this particular college for not offering hope to young college graduates. But this critique actually does not go deeper and does not actually address the depths of the depravity of the statement that all of you just witnessed. I believe that Biden's remarks were actually part of a common political strategy that is oftentimes used by politicians and tyrants and propagandists to instill a kind of artificial hopelessness within the minds of people that then justifies the existence or justifies the power those politicians, those propagandists, and those people happen to have. Before I explain this phenomenon in general, let's actually look at the speech that Biden just gave once again. In that short snippet, Biden did two things that are rather suspect. Number one, he invoked a rhetorical term called democracy, which has no standing in American political history, which means absolutely nothing in the American context and only means something in the minds of those who are ignorant of American history and who are convinced that democracy is actually a coherent form of political organization, when in all reality, any simple analysis of democracy will show that it both leads to political tyranny, and democracy cannot actually enforce morality because the masses, justifying politics by the masses alone is not justifying politics by ethics, first principles, which is what a republic does. So he uses this falsehood that has had a prominent home in American politics to make an even more absurd point: the idea that black people are constantly assailed in this dystopian picture of America, so much so that they have even a hard time loving their country, so much so that you would think the relationship between a black person and America is one of constant, universal strife, struggle, and conflict, where they cannot succeed, where they cannot live the American dream, and where they are constantly fighting for their lives. When in all reality, if you look at how African Americans throughout American history have prospered, have invented things, and have achieved economic and intellectual prosperity, you don't really see this same kind of thing happen in any other place in the world. You don't see, for example, what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma with Black Wall Street, and there wasn't just Tulsa, several other enclaves of freed slaves that from immediately leaving the fields went into their own cities, bought land, and immediately became millionaires over time. You don't see that happening in a lot of places in Africa or across the world, because there is something unique about the American ethos which enables excellence in every single person regardless of their identity. You don't really see, the kind of progression in social mobility that has historically happened in America in minority communities as well happen pretty much anywhere else in the world. Or if you do see it, it's not to the same level and extent it has been historically. And if you look at today, the amount of black people that are represented across fields in the nation, it's absolutely extraordinary. So the narrative he is painting is one that is not confirmed by the facts, It is instead one that is confirmed by a certain cynicism about American history that is buttressed by narratives that are based on isolated incidences that are then cast within the broad picture of history. Because it's very easy to convince someone in the modern day they are oppressed if you keep their eyes off the present and keep their vision affixed permanently on the past, and then you invoke certain things that happen in the present to justify them looking at the past. But the problem with this approach is that the past is the past, and the conditions of history, unlike what the Marxists think, are not necessary conditions of the present or the future, and America is living proof of that. America is a disjointed example of that because we disconnected from the stream of political and social history, which was bound up in caste systems, bound up in feudal systems, bound up in familial bloodlines, bound up in monarchy, bound up in being slavish towards institutions, and we embraced what Henry Sumner Maine, the great historian, called contract, where we actually enabled our ability to voluntarily trade and understand people on that level, and that created our society. But this is only one aspect of the broader picture here. The broader picture here is that what Biden was doing goes way beyond his appeal to the African American people in that crowd. I wouldn't even say the appeal, the attempt to de-optimize them. It actually goes to a deeper phenomenon that is part and parcel, unfortunately, to the science of politics, and it is called hopelessness by design. Politicians need, in free societies, or in societies that are representative in terms of the government structure, need to find ways to hold on to power. And normally, in the American context, this would simply happen by them appealing to the masses on the basis of them following the first principles of the Constitution and the ethos of our country. But over the past 100 plus so years, the Constitution and the American ethos have been ransacked and attacked by foreign ideologies imported from Europe, especially, for example, imported from that was then Prussia, is now modern day Germany, which the progressive era embodied, which essentially said a lot of the ideas of the American past need to be updated to include more centralized control over the person. So in order for a politician in this new pseudo-American reality to justify his control or justify his retention of power, there has to be a need. Just like in order for a business owner to sell you a product, you must also have a need. Now, if people were empowered to believe that they have responsibility over their own lives and that their action in society is more important than the action of institutions or the government, the need for politics becomes much, much less, and the demand for social, organic, ground-up social institutions flourishes. It explodes. But if you can convince man that his only way out of a situation, or his only way to achieve a flourishing society, is by government intervention, and most certainly by laws and political action, the demand for politics and political solutions to personal problems increases. And the power of society and social institutions and community and the churches and the individual decreases. So what is the best way to get people to resign their hope, faith, and confidence in an external source? Make them feel panicked. Make them feel hopeless. The great dictators of the world, from Hitler to Mussolini, appeal to the masses on the basis of them being the solution to the problems they faced in their lives. In terms of Hitler appealed to the German people by pointing towards the League of Nations and pointing towards the desolation of Germany after World War I. And he then used that synergy, that anger, that fury, that hopelessness to propel himself and his miscreants into power. Mussolini appealed to the nation and subsumed the individual and within the nation, and then used that to propel himself to power as Il Duce. This continues to happen. FDR did the same kind of thing. The only thing they had to fear is fear itself. He painted himself as a solution to a broader problem happening in American society, and by doing that, he radically transformed the American way of life by centralizing it, and by putting the government in a position to do more than it was ever properly or morally conceptualized to do in the first place. When someone was within a period of hopelessness or a period of emergency, they don't look at themselves. They will see themselves normally as limited, or they will see themselves as limited in face of this broader, bigger conflict. And if someone sees themselves as limited in the face of a broader, bigger conflict, they will appeal to forces greater than them to handle that. Therefore, this hopelessness by design, in the case of what Biden was doing, is actually twofold, actually. It's quite funny. Number one, this hopelessness by design was in a roundabout way meant to bolster the case for the Democratic Party and to have Black Americans continually voting for the Democratic Party, regardless of their atrocious track record of selling them victimhood and grievance and not actually selling them real solutions to real problems. Because again, if the politics of hopelessness is our standard, then it should be no trouble whatsoever for certain people to claim they have the answers. And it should also be no problem whatsoever, and this is the second part of this, for that one party to claim that they exclusively care about the plights and the lives of Black people. When you have this politics of hopelessness within any other case, by the way, because we had this politics of hopelessness in terms of what happened after 9/11, a lot of Americans felt justifiably upset and hurt and grieved in 9/11, and that hopelessness was then transformed into a political solution, which ended up being one of the greatest rights violations of our era in the form of the Patriot Act, then the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security, which continued to further the violations of our rights and our privacy, and then the beginning, the sort of genesis of two conflicts that relatively destroyed American integrity in the Middle East and continued to destabilize the world, Afghanistan and Iraq. All of that only happened because the public was in a bout of hopelessness. Look at what happened over the COVID-19 pandemic. Many people laid down, accepted unacceptable curfew laws, allowed things to happen to them that under any circumstances is absolutely insane and ridiculous, and resigned their trust to experts on the basis of their status, not on the basis of the merits of their word, because they felt hopeless. Hopelessness by design, my friends, is meant to get you to think emotionally, not rationally. So when I saw what Biden said, I didn't think, oh man, he's not being inspirational. I said, oh man, he's using a playbook out of some of the most devious dark arts applications of political action and propaganda that has been conceived. And he is doing it, unfortunately, quite well. There are many other instances of the politics of hopelessness and what it's done in American society. Look at the welfare state. The welfare state really emerged after the Great Depression when many Americans believed that they didn't have any other solution but then to trust the big man, Uncle Sam, to help them. And so what happened, a force came in from the government that eroded social relationships and placed the government in as the caretaker. Again, the norms of power are inherently corrosive to a civil society. And regardless of what your political ideology is, if you care about community, if you care about cooperation within society, if you care about social cohesion, and that goes across any political viewpoint, you should care about how hopelessness by design is used to manufacture certain realities that are detrimental to the health of people, the health of their nation, and fundamentally, the health of their society. My friends, reject the politics of hopelessness. Reject hopelessness by design and see through Joe Biden and his friends and everyone else who uses this, their attempts to put the wool over your eyes and convince you of realities that are only speciously plausible, but in all reality are much more complex than they actually seem. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe, do whatever you can. Be sure to support me. Be sure to donate to me if you want to. All that is in the comment section down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please, stay pensive. Bye, guys.